Desean Jackson has a great idea for Norfolk State versus Delaware State. I just don't think 2025 is the year to implement it. Oh, yeah. It's locked on HBCU. Play my music.
You are Locked On HBCU, your daily podcast covering HBCU sports. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's going on, family? Welcome back to another episode of the Locked On HBCU podcast, your number one daily one-stop shop for everything HBCU athletics, Monday through Friday, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And now, of course, I'm Darian Gray, a.k.a. the Mouth of the South, Texas Southern alum and former TSU Herald Sports editor and current contributing writer at USA Today's Saints Wire. Thank you for going on this journey with me. Make it Locked On HBCU your first listen of the day every day. And remember, just because the mic cuts off does not mean that the journey is over. Just means it's time to follow me on Twitter at South Exclusives. Over here is where it is. I'm still getting used to the new background. Starts with an S and ends with an S. And one day I will stop messing this thing up. But today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Go to FanDuel.com. And if you're new to FanDuel, you'll get $300 back in bonus bets if you put down a $5 winning bet. From the first whistle to the final drive, FanDuel is making your NFL experience more exciting. We'll wrap up today's episode with a look at Jamarion Stubbs, the Alabama State sprinter, who is still at it at the same university, and there's a larger message that comes with what he's doing, as well as his own individual success. In segment 2, there's been a lack of representation this year. We do not have many HBCU players who will be involved in the pre-draft bowls, which are the Shrine Bowl and also the Senior Bowl. We're only focusing on the premium events. However, when we're talking about premium events, I do believe that Delaware State versus Norfolk State, Desean Jackson versus Michael Vick, that is the definition of a premium event. And I believe that Desean Jackson has a phenomenal idea of how to present this game. The way he wants to present this game as a marquee matchup, which it should be catered to for the next couple of years, is to put Delaware State versus Norfolk State at the Philadelphia Eagles Stadium. And while I think that that is a phenomenal idea, Michael Vick, Desean Jackson going toe-to-toe in a stadium in which they used to play together as teammates, HBCUs, I think it's a phenomenal idea. But in 2025, I don't think that that's the year to do it. I'd say even 2026, I'm not in love with to do it. I'm not in love doing it then. But 2027, there we got it. See, because here's the thing. Desean Jackson and Michael Vick represent celebrity coaches. Yes, and feel how you want to feel about it. The matchup between the two of them, we've never had two in the same conference. Eddie George was in the Big South, then Big South OVC. Then you had Deion Sanders, who was in the SWAC by himself. You have Michael Vick, and you have Desean Jackson, who share the MEAC. Not only do they share the MEAC, they used to share a team, which was the Philadelphia Eagles. So when Desean Jackson says, I want to have this game between Norfolk State and Delaware State in the Philadelphia Eagles Stadium, I think it makes perfect sense. I think it looks like a marquee matchup, and it should be treated that way. But I do it in 2027. I heard, and I don't want to give credit to the wrong person, but just know it was not my original thought. So I'll just give credit out there. 2025, make it homecoming. And here's the thing, you can't give it to them for both of their homecomings. So do the same thing in 2026 for the opposite squad. I think that just having homecoming being a big event is a huge deal. Having your homecoming be a big event is always important. Sometimes you want to schedule somebody you're just going to roll over so you get an easy win. And sometimes you want to make this a true game to remember, a moment to remember. So I would say at least in 2025, let it be a homecoming game. In 2026, then you should be able to at least entertain the idea of it going to the Philadelphia Eagles Stadium. And I know some people talk about travel. I don't know the logistics. I do not know the logistics that it takes to get from DSU on out to Philadelphia. I don't know the logistics of what it takes to get from NSU. I don't really like how NSU sounds. It writes well, but it doesn't sound the best. I prefer Norfolk State or Norfolk. I don't know the logistics and the money and all of the things that come with that. I'm not here to do that. I'm not a pocketbook. That's not my cup of tea. That's not my specialty. What I come in here to tell you about is about the game. And I can even talk a little bit of marketing, which I think that this is. Could you imagine the highlight tape that you would see the first time they face off? You're going to see it already. Be prepared. When you see Norfolk State versus Delaware State, you're going to see buku clips of Michael Vick throwing to Desean Jackson. You're going to see it because you should. You build up these games. So you do that. And then you also have it on that stadium or in that stadium. You talk to me about the logistics, the money that it takes to get out there. I'm going to say this. You can travel. They have neutral site games. It's not like it would be the first time that a neutral site game has been played. Let me look it up. Let me see where the Circle City Classic was played. Because if I'm not mistaken, I think that was played in the Colts Stadium. But the point is, you can do this. It was in Lucas Oil. So I think all of the things people say, oh, we don't want to have it in this big venue because of whatever you may not want to. North Carolina Central played Mississippi Valley State in the Indianapolis Colts Stadium. If you're telling me that Norfolk State versus Delaware State, Michael Vick versus Desean Jackson in the Philadelphia Eagles Stadium where they used to play together wouldn't sell? You can't sell that to me? I'm not saying it's got to be a sellout, but you telling me that's not doable? It's very difficult for me to believe that. It is very difficult. If you don't want to do it, you don't want to do it. But don't tell me you can't do it. Don't tell me it's not smart. Because I seen North Carolina Central play Mississippi Valley State. And then the next year, they came back and played another game there. So, do I want to see Desean Jackson versus Michael Vick in the Eagles stadiums? Yes, 100%. 100%. I want to see that game at the Eagles Stadium. But at the same time, I don't think that this is a 2025 deal. I think in 2025, you make it a marquee event on the campus. You make it a marquee event that all of the kids, all of the students, all of the local alumni can get to. You want to have this as accessible as possible. It's not that Desean Jackson gave a bad idea. It's just not right now. And I would say you got to give these guys who have no experience at least 3 years, right? I think that's fair. I think giving them 3 years is fair. So in year 3, let's put it in the Eagle Stadium. Now, I understand that requires you to show some sort of pull. It requires you to have some sort of quality of performance. You have to be a solid head coach, lead the team to good performance or to good results. I get that. So planning it down the line comes with its own difficulties because then you're hedging your bets that, okay, Delaware State and Norfolk State, at least one, preferably both of them, will be good in 2025 or 2026 because then that's how we got to sell that will have this big venue in 2027. I get all of that. But don't tell me you can't do it. Don't tell me it's a bad idea. Don't tell me that. Somebody said he just wants to show. Man, drop that. He don't just want to show. He don't just want to show. He's trying to put on TV. He is trying to publicize. He's trying to market. Are we going to reject the marketing? And it's not even, I don't even think it's just like self-serving marketing. I just think it's logical. It's so logical. We should have thought about it earlier. It's not like he said, I want Delaware State to have every home game in Philadelphia. He ain't say no crazy stuff like that. He didn't even say, I want Delaware State to have a random game in Philadelphia. He said, I want to face my former teammate that I played with in Philadelphia where we're both loved. I think we should play against each other in the city. Cha-ching, 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 cha-ching. It's a money grab, if anything. If nothing else, you're going to be making money off of that. Come on now. This is genius to me. I just want to give it to the people first. That's it. That's it. Let the people have that first. But if they do it in 2025, I'm not upset about it. I just don't think they should do it at least until next year and preferably 2027. Now, let's continue pushing talking about this. We go from an extremely excited topic, an extremely positive and fruitful topic to a conversation of scarcity. We're going to pivot to how many HBCU players are in the marquee pre-draft bowls. And we'll do that as we continue with Locked On HBCU. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. FanDuel is the official sports book of the Locked On Podcast Network. Now, the NFL playoffs are here, and from the first whistle to the final drive, FanDuel is trying to make sure that you have the time of your life and put a little bit of extra money in your pocket. Now, if you're new to FanDuel, you get $300 back in bonus bets if you put down a $5 winning bet. Maybe you forgot and they already kicked off. You think to yourself, that was my opportunity. I missed it. You would be wrong. That is your opportunity, but you did not miss it. All you have to do is go in there because they have the middle of the game. Middle of the game, you can still put down money. It doesn't matter. So you go ahead and go to FanDuel.com. And even if you don't want to do it on the NFL, you could do it for the NBA. Did you make a little bit of money on MLK Day? You probably could have made more with FanDuel. All you have to do is go to FanDuel.com. That is FanDuel.com. Take advantage of the $300 back in bonus bets with a $5 winning bet when you go to FanDuel.com. Make every moment more. As we continue rolling on today's episode of Locked On HBCU, I appreciate you for making this your first listen of the day every day. For your second listen, make sure you're checking out Locked On College Football for a recap of the college football playoffs between Notre Dame and Ohio State in the college championship. It's been a big-time event for a couple of weeks, and this game has been no different. Now, we've talked about Vick versus Jackson, and honestly, we'll probably use that tagline at some other point. I can think of at least two other times in which Vick versus Jackson will be a tagline for us when we're talking about a comparison of how they have started off going into spring ball, maybe coming out of spring ball. I probably won't do it for both. That's just a tad bit lazy. And also, I don't think we'd have enough information to make a completely different topic coming out of spring ball. It just would be limited. But that being said, you could do it around spring practice. Vick versus Jackson when it actually goes down. Vick versus Jackson when they project where each team will finish. Like, there's a lot of Vick versus Jackson on how their season has transpired in year one. The comparison between these two guys is going to be endless. I think that there's a lot of parallels between Eddie George and Deion Sanders, but I think the parallels here are even greater. They're even greater because they'll face each other. It's here, man. I can already tell you, whatever's going on, that will be the game of the week. Vick versus Jackson, Delaware State versus Norfolk State. That's what it's going to be. And I hope that you're happy about it. I hope it's not something crazy like Jackson State versus whoever the second best team in the SWAC is that year. That would be insane. Or Howard versus North Carolina Central, or South Carolina State versus North Carolina Central. I think that I'm a little bit more excited for that game. But anyway, maybe that's the topic we need to talk about. But anyway, right now, you're looking at a lack of pre-draft representation, and I would much rather talk about anything else, right? Like I would get more joy, but this is a conversation that is not as happy, but it's also necessary because you're seeing less HBCU players in these marquee bowl games, right? And the first thing we have to address is that there is no more NFLPA Bowl. That ended technically last year or 2 years ago. There was no NFLPA Bowl last year. That was the first year without it. So now you're looking at just the Shrine Bowl and the Senior Bowl. And where that has a problem is that you naturally are going to have less talent because you're going to get less players. Now, will most HBCU players who come out qualify for the Senior Bowl? Yes, because most HBCU players who come out, they're not coming out early. They've exhausted their eligibility. But the problem is you don't see a lot of them there. And I've heard some people say things about Nagy. I don't necessarily know if I agree. You know, I get it. I hated that Marquise Bell didn't get an opportunity to be in this game a couple of years ago, and then he goes undrafted. And I think moments like that with the whole Nagy situation where he was like, look, I stand on that. That brought a little bit of contention between him and the HBCU landscape because we really rode for Marquise Bell. Because quite frankly, he was one of the guys, man. He was really one of the guys. For him to not make it, we were like, what? And I think people held on to that. And then Nagy coming out and just standing 10 toes on it, like, yeah, I don't think that he should be here. Then he ended up not getting drafted. So that's a whole lot of other stuff. But anyway, in 2025, you have Carson Vincent, the offensive tackle at Alabama A&M. He's going to be at the Senior Bowl. And then you have South Carolina State linebacker Aaron Smith, he'll be at the Shrine Bowl. I'll be at the Shrine Bowl as well. I just need them to pass my credentials. Pass my credentials so I can be in there, all right? Golly, hit around the corner from the house. But anywho, the Shrine Bowl has Aaron Smith. Carson Vincent is going to be representing the SWAC in the Senior Bowl, and that's where it stops. No disrespect to any other team, any other player, any other bowl game, but those other bowl games are not this one. Those other bowl games, simply put, are not the Shrine Bowl, and they're not the Senior Bowl. And it doesn't mean that players from those bowls don't get drafted, but that's where most of the scouts, that's where most of the attention is going to be. And I think that it's also a statement of who is top tier. That that's what happened. 9 times out of 10, the top tier people are at these premium 3 and now premium 2. The NFLPA Bowl I did have in that mix at one point. But what does this mean? I think it's just it's a drop. And G, he's gonna come on here and he's gonna talk to us on Friday about different representation and different bowls and things of that nature. And he'll do what he does. But for me, in my opinion, this is something that's disappointing to see. And I also think it's indicative of where the HBCU draft relationship is currently at. I can't sit here and say where it's headed because we've had no players drafted. Like, that's happened. That's not anything new. It's just more so of, I think there was a peak one year, that Carter year. You had Durant, you had Williams, you had Carter. I think was that same season out of Southern, Ja'Tyre Carter, the offensive lineman. I think you had 3, maybe even 4. And it was a peak, and we felt good because it was right after the 0. Oh, yeah, we in there. We weren't. And it's almost like a come to reality, I ain't gonna say come to Jesus moment, but I'd say it was a come back down to earth moment of, this is where you at. It's not a lot of small school representation, and it's going to be a lot less HBCU representation in these games. Why is it even important, though? Why should you even care if there's not any guys there, right? And it has nothing to do, the reason you should care is not so much you're there, you get drafted. It's not that simple, right? Like, Willie Drew was there last year. Willie Drew, I haven't heard about Willie Drew since the Senior Bowl or since the Combine. Legitimately. I thought that he was, and it sounds so bad, but it is what it is. I thought that Willie Drew was a prime example of what you don't want to do when you go to these games. He did not look like he was supposed to be there from everything I heard. I don't think he had a great combine in shirts and shorts. Like when you go to these events as a small school prospect, it is your job to blow folks away. It is most definitely your job to not disappoint. And unfortunately, he didn't do the former, and he did do the latter. And that's why Willie Drew is a prime example of the negative side of this, because there's a lot more pressure on you as a small school prospect. If Willie Drew, who went to Virginia State, happened to be Willie Drew, who went to the University of Virginia, he might be able to get away with that. Willie Drew, Virginia State can't do that. Can't. Carson Vincent, Alabama A&M can't do that. Carson Vincent, Alabama, he could. Because the truth of the matter is, there are 32 teams represented, and every team is looking at the small school guy as, prove to me you are not a product of the small school. So when you come out there for 3-4 days of practice, if you look bad, they ain't even going to go back to the tape, because they're going to say, when you got around the big dogs, you turn into a puppy. Fair? Maybe not. To judge somebody based off of a week of practice, maybe not. Realistic? Accurate? Yes. This is exactly how it happens. So it's just on you to decide, all right, how am I going to perform? Last year, I was able to see Sundiata Anderson. I was able to see Amin Dankwa. I was able to see Mikey Victor, all at the Shrine Bowl. This year, there's more people, or there's less people between the Shrine Bowl and Senior Bowl than it was just at the Shrine Bowl last year. I remember when it was the Kobe Durant, it was Aubrey Miller, it was Isaiah Land, it was Shaq Davis, Dallas Daniels, Mark Evans. Like you could go through these classes and pick out 3, 4, 5 players. But then the next question becomes, is there less players at these Senior Bowl, Shrine Bowl level pre-draft games because there's less marquee HBCU talent? I think that's a legitimate conversation to have. I will talk about it with Gerald on Friday because he'll be on the show. But I think that we will address this individually as well, depending on how at length that we go with Gerald. I legitimately believe when you see Mark Evans, you see Isaiah Land, right? Like you see Shaq Davis, you see Aubrey Miller, you see the Kobe Durant. There's guys who feel like high profile players from this small school. And I'm just even just talking about on this level. I don't know if that's here this year. Who's the high profile guy? I would say Irv Mulligan is the high profile guy. Maybe even Eric Phoenix. Yeah, probably Eric Phoenix is a high profile guy too. I think that's kind of James Burgess should be. James Burgess should be. I don't know if he's considered that or not, but I do believe he has the talent and the comes from a university with a proven track record to be that. But in general, it's not a lot of high profile talent. It's unfortunate though. Let's push forward and let's look at somebody who is high profile. Jamarion Stubbs, the sprinter out of Alabama State. We'll look at why his return to the Hornets is a big deal. And it's a larger message there that I want to retell as we wrap up today's episode of Locked On HBCU. Today's episode is brought to you by Prize Picks. Listen, it's the easiest way to get real money sports action. With over 10 million members and billions in winnings, Prize Picks has changed the game in daily fantasy sports. Whether it's the playoffs or regular season, Prize Picks has made it easier than ever to win big while enjoying all the football action. Now listen here. There's 4 teams left in this thing. Then you have the college football playoffs, but technically that ended last night, so you ain't got no opportunity there. There's 4 teams left. Are we rocking with Jaden Daniels? His over. Are we rocking with Jalen Hurts? His over. Are we rocking with Patrick Mahomes? He always seems to hit his over. But then again, this ain't the same Chiefs. Josh Allen, is he going to have more or less rushing yards? These are all interesting aspects of the game. And at Prize Picks, you can take advantage of every single one. So ready to run your game this football season? It's almost over. Download the app today and use the code LOCKEDONCollege to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. That's right, $50 just for playing. Don't wait. Take your game to the next level with Prize Picks. It's Prize Picks, run your game. As we're wrapping up today's episode of Locked On HBCU, I appreciate you for making this your first listen of the day, every day, making it all the way to segment 3. And I thank you 2 times for that. Thank you. Thank you. Listen, Jamarion Stubbs, the Alabama State sprinter, his return to the Hornets, it says a lot. I don't know what it says about him, but I think it speaks volumes about the stick-to-itiveness. And I don't think that's a word, but I've heard other people say it. The stick-to-itiveness of the HBCU grind, right? And I hate talking about the grind of HBCUs. I think it's so counterproductive, but it's real. It's real, right? If I'm talking to somebody about an HBCU experience personally, yeah, but people be using that as a selling point. I don't love it. I don't love it. It has its values. Don't get me wrong. It does have its values to have to go through that. But in general, I'm not really selling that. But anyway, the point is Jamarion Stubbs, he was an Olympic trials member last year. He could have went elsewhere, but he's stuck here. And I love it with track and field because time is time. That's the beautiful part about track. If I run it here or if I run it there, I ran it. The only thing they want to have a conversation about is how much wind was there. That's it. With track, they just want to know how much wind was it. Oh, you was in Wisconsin? Cool. How much wind was it? Oh, you was in Hawaii? Cool. How much wind was it? That's all they care, right? That's it. They ain't going to disqualify me for going to a Division II school. If I run faster than Usain Bolt and I'm at an NAIA, I'm faster than Usain Bolt. That's the beautiful part. But it's so easy to say, I'm going to go somewhere else that has, I don't know, this program or that program, and they specialize in sprinters. Instead, he stayed at Alabama State. And the reason I'm even bringing this up is because he's back at it, man. It's indoor season, and he made his in-season debut, first time at the Vanderbilt at the Vanderbilt Invitational. He qualified, prelim time 6.69, right? But then he comes out and he runs a 6.59. He comes out and he runs a 6.59. And that is a Alabama State record. And he's still doing it. He comes back and he doesn't cease to amaze you. He's fresh off of Olympic trials. He ain't full at all. He doesn't decide I need to go anywhere else at all. Instead, he decides I'm going to stick right here with Alabama State. It's going to be me. It's going to be the Hornets. And we're going to keep doing what we've been doing. We're going to go get a national championship. Or I'm going to go get a national championship. Because they're not going to, with all due respect. They might win the SWAC, but they're not going to get a national championship. They're just not going to have the amount of players that are required or athletes that are required to make it to Eugene to win a national championship. I'm willing to write this stuff down and eat my words if I'm wrong. But I just think if you're being realistic about the game we play, in the words of my boy Push, these are the games we play. Jamarion Stubbs has the opportunity to go out to nationals and be a real player, to be on that podium. He ran his 200 amazingly last year. I would really like to see him hone in and focus on that and the different aspects. I'm not about to tell this man how to get better, how to improve or anything like that. But just in general, I'm saying Jamarion Stubbs is a real player. And I know people took notice. And I'm sure his phone was ringing with people trying to get him into that portal to go elsewhere. And he's a young guy. He's a young guy. I think that Jamarion Stubbs is just going into his junior year, if I'm not mistaken. But the point is, yeah, so 2023, he was a freshman. 24, he'll be a sophomore. So now 25, he's going into his junior season. He still had 2 years of eligibility to work with a team, to work with a program, and really build himself up. Track and field is not a sport that gets a lot of love, but it definitely deserves some. And when you make decisions that hold the weight that Jamarion Stubbs made, you got to acknowledge that. Word to my boy Roman, you got to acknowledge that. But I acknowledge my appreciation for you making this your first listen of the day every day. I told you I'll be at the Shrine Bowl this weekend. Gerald Huggins will be on the show on Friday. For tomorrow's episode, most likely it'll be tomorrow's episode, we're going to take a look at what I want to see from Aaron Smith. What do I want to see from Aaron Smith in this Shrine Bowl week of practice? I was able to talk to my mentor, and we came up with some pretty good ideas on what we want to see from the South Carolina State linebacker. That conversation will probably lead off tomorrow's episode. If not tomorrow, it will definitely be Thursday's episode. But in the meantime, in between time, until the next time that we hear each other, family, take care, stay blessed. Peace.